Welcome, everybody, to today's regular meeting of the Yountville Town Council. It is Tuesday, June the 3rd at 3 p.m. Can we get a roll call vote, please, our town clerk?
Councilmember Reeves? Here. Councilmember Tripp? Here. Councilmember Knight?
Here.
Vice Mayor McKee? Here. Mayor Moeller?
Here. Thank you. Can we all stand and say the Pledge of Allegiance, please? All right. Thank you. And before we get started, I just wanted to mention that we had a special meeting at 1 o'clock today prior to this one, and we did not conclude that one yet, but a motion was made that we would continue that until after this 3 o'clock meeting. So I just wanted to acknowledge that. And with that, I'd like to get a motion to adopt today's agenda.
Move to adopt?
Second.
Sorry.
Yes, thank you.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, any abstain? That passes unanimously. Council member announcements. Do we have any? Seeing none, I am going to move on to proclamations and recognitions. We have one today in support of the council's support of Gay Pride Month, and I'm just going to read this from the dais to all in support of all of our community. This is a proclamation in recognition of LGBTQ plus Pride Month. Whereas June is recognized internationally as LGBTQ plus Pride Month, honoring the history, struggles, resilience, and ongoing contributions of lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, queer, intersex, asexual, and other members of the LGBTQ plus community. And whereas Pride Month offers an opportunity to affirm the dignity of all of our people, celebrate diversity, and promote inclusion and equity, regardless of sexual orientation, gender identity, or gender expression. And whereas Pride Month commemorates milestones in the ongoing movement for LGBTQ plus rights and visibility, while celebrating the powers of community, visibility, and love. And whereas inclusive symbols such as the Progress Pride flag reflect the evolving diversity of the LGBTQ plus community and stand as powerful reminders of the importance of acceptance and representation. And whereas the town of Yountville is proud to uphold its commitment to inclusion and equity as reflected in its 2009 Equal Rights Resolution and through its continued work to foster a safe and welcoming environment for all residents, employees, and visitors. And whereas LGBTQ plus community members, including veterans, residents, business owners, workers, students, and guests, contribute to the cultural richness, civic vitality, and economic success of Yountville and the greater Napa Valley. And whereas Yountville proudly hosts a variety of local events throughout June to uplift LGBTQ plus voices and celebrate pride with creativity, joy, and unity. Now, therefore, let it be resolved that I, Margie Moeller, Mayor of the Town of Yountville, on behalf of the entire Town Council, do hereby recognize June 2025 as LGBTQ plus Pride Month in the Town of Yountville and encourage all members of the community to reflect on the importance of inclusion and respect as we celebrate together in this year. And just to let you know, right before this meeting, we raised our flag, the LGBTQ, what is it called? The Progressive flag. It's a new one out there and for our community. So it'll be up in front of Town Hall for the entire month of June. So thank you, everyone. Now we will move on to public comment. Now, this is the public comment that's on anything that is not on today's agenda. If anybody has public comment, you could come up to the microphone and give us your name.
I did. I got my bucket. My name is Cheryl Stanley. I live.
Could you speak into your microphone, please?
Oh, I'm sorry. My name is Cheryl Stanley. I live out on Yountville Crossroad, and I'm just on our continuing search to get corrections for our our poor water situation there. My 5-gallon bucket was dirty, and so I brought this 3.5-gallon one to just demonstrate. This one, when it's full of water, weighs 30 pounds. My 5-gallon, when it's full of water, weighs 42 pounds. And for me to carry 42 pounds in a bucket like this, it's almost half my weight. I mean, and I just, it just isn't the way life should be. And I have just a couple of comments, but one that really touched me is over the weekend we got, as residents of the community, got a letter about the heat. And it tells about how to take care of yourself in the heat and your family members and animals. But at the end of that page, I thought it was most interesting. It said the town of Yountville they're committed to the health and safety of all who live and work and visit here. Through ongoing Yountville Ready emergency preparedness, we are focused on keeping our community informed, connected, and equipped for all type of hazards, including extreme heat. And I wonder if having clean water at my house doesn't fit into that category. Our goal is to build a resilient community, a place where neighbors can look out for one another. Critical information is accessible, and everybody knows where to turn to for help. Then it goes on to say, stay safe, don't hesitate to reach out to town hall if you need assistance. Well, I've been reaching out. I have done some checking about the State Water Resources Control Board. I guess I should stop and say that I have an appointment with John on Thursday afternoon, so I don't think that this conflicts with that. I'm just telling you what I have done and where I feel a need is. So State Water Resources Control Board states an issue with help with issues on technical management, and one of their goals is to help with poor water delivery systems. And I know that state money isn't, you can't just click a finger and it's going to be there, but the Water Resources Control Board has distributed more than $80 million to areas having failing systems. In 2019, Governor Newsom signed a law that channels millions of dollars into failing water systems, including consolidation into larger systems. So I just want help, and I would like to know that something is going to be done to correct our system so I don't have to continue to flush my toilet with a bucket of water. And I think that the request that I have at the moment, with the little information I've done locally, is I'm just asking for the same water transfer system be in place that exists for the town of Yountville, that exists for the Veterans Home, and we need a transfer station, a transfer mechanism to transfer water when it's shut off at the dam. That water will get transferred to our houses too. We should be treated I think we should be treated the same as the town of Yountville and the Veterans Home, but we're excluded from that. We don't get that transfer station. So again, thank you for listening to me, and I'm hopeful that something will come of this.
Thank you. And anybody else would like to make public comment today? Just state your name for us.
Good afternoon. My name is Rob Orr, and with me is Leslie Moretti, and we are members of the Board of Directors for Community Action of Napa Valley. Community Action of Napa Valley, or CANVI, is celebrating 60 years serving Napa County, and it was started by President Lyndon Johnson back in 1975, of course, to end poverty. CANVI, through its programs, has helped in this mission. The CANVI Food Bank in the month of April served 3,678 individuals and families. 478 of those were residents of Yountville. We deliver 324 silver Fox boxes, and these are boxes that are filled with 9 to 12 staple items. 59 are delivered to Yountville citizens or residents. Meals on Wheels delivers, is another one of our services, delivers 503 meals per day to those that cannot cook for themselves, and 59 are delivered in Yountville. In the month of April, 241,995 pounds of food was distributed throughout Napa County. In 2022, Canvey purchased our new food bank facility, which is out on Kaiser Road in Napa, and this replaced our former facility. And this addition has enabled us to expand our operations and increase the distribution of food to the community. I want to thank you for the opportunity to speak about the services we provide to Yountville residents and throughout Napa County. To learn more about the programs we offer or schedule a tour of the new food bank, please go to canvey.org. Tours are every third Monday of the month at 10 a.m. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much, Mr. Orr. I don't think many of us probably realized the amount of services that you deliver to Yountville. So on behalf of the council, thank you very much for all the work that you do and your organization. Greatly appreciate it. Do we have anybody else who would like to address the council during public comment? Yes, please come up.
Good evening, council and community members. My name is Sergio Brajas. I'm a field rep with the NorCal Carpenters Union, Local 180, which covers Solano County, and I'm here to talk about the core values we represent with the Carpenters Union. Our goal is to provide a knowledgeable apprenticeship program, providing extensive health benefits for our workers, encouraging local employment opportunities for our members, and fair wages. Our statewide apprenticeship program is essential in ensuring quality of work. It is designed to create a new generation of skilled carpenters who are trained in the latest technologies and strategies. Our apprenticeship does not only train our members, but instills a sense of pride, responsibility, and craftsmanship. By investing in our programs, we ensure our workforce is competitive and able to meet the needs of the industry's ever-evolving demands. Another key point of our values is our commitment to providing health care for our workers. Carpentry is physically demanding, so it is essential for our workers to have access to these benefits for them and their families. These benefits not only include immediate medical care, but preventative care and long-term health support. A healthy workforce is a dynamic workforce, and by prioritizing our workers' health, we ensure that they can contribute tactfully and safely. Another one of our pledges is to hire locally. When we hire locally, we strengthen our community by creating economic growth that is reflected in local business, which will increase the prosperity of our communities. Local workers tend to be more vested in projects that are in their own neighborhood, resulting in higher quality and shorter commute hours. Furthermore, local employment reduces the carbon footprint associated with commuting, contributing to our environmental sustainability goals. Prevailing wage isn't just a number. It represents the fair wages that tradesmen and women deserve and work hard for. These wages allow workers to support them and their families, contribute to local economy, and ensure quality work that impacts infrastructure and safety. In conclusion, our core values include dedication to our apprenticeship training, comprehensive health benefits, our pledge to local hire, and fair wages. These values are essential in maintaining a skilled and healthy craftsmen and women, creating a ripple effect into our communities and the youth. Thank you.
Thank you very much for coming. Do we have any other body who would like to address the council during our open public comment? Seeing none, I will bring it back. Item number 8 is our consent calendar. Before I ask council, does anybody have any public comment on our consent calendar today? Okay, I will bring it back for possible action by council. If can I perhaps get a motion and a second to approve our consent calendar today?
I'll move approval of the consent calendar.
I'll second that.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, any abstain? That passes unanimously. Thank you very much. We have no guest presentation, and we have 2 public hearings today, so we're going to use our our voting mechanism once we talk about each one of these items. So the first one is adopting a resolution adopting fees and charges for the commercial rental use of the community center kitchen, Smith Hall in the Yountville Commons and park picnic sites, and removing fees from another picnic site and authorizing staff to update the master fee schedule. So Samantha, or interim town
Thank you.
manager?
Yes, thank you. So before you, as you mentioned, Mayor, is a resolution adopting new fees and charges, as well as one where we are changing a fee and charge, and then one where we're taking one away. So starting with a brief explanation of the new fees, we don't have a mechanism currently of running the kitchen at the community center for commercial use, so that would be focused towards a business that wanted to use it on an hourly reservation process to prepare foods, whether that was for catering or production of some sort. It's not something that our intent is to market or have a lot of use of, but to have some sort of mechanism in order to work with people if we do get a request that fits our current schedule. Currently, the master fee schedule only has a kitchen rental fee that's attached to use of a different room. So this would give us more flexibility in that. And then staff would have, more comprehensive administrative policies and rules around that use. The second addition would be for the use of Schmidt Hall at the Yountville Commons. As you're well aware, that facility is now open and running well for the public, and so we want the ability, if we get requests, and also to add it to our marketing materials, that the hall itself could be rented for private or other community events. The hall is 3,300 square feet. It has the small prep kitchen and access to the shared restrooms. We would outfit it with tables, chairs, and then also the access to audio-visual components. And so we prep the fees for that based on the current fees for the community hall heritage room. They're about the same size, but obviously the heritage room offers the full kitchen and a little bit of a higher level of aesthetics, and so we did base these fees on Schmidt Hall at this point, $30 less per hour, but we then followed the same fee scale that is throughout the current master fee schedule for all the different types of uses. So we have a pretty large reaching fee scale that includes nonprofit rates, resident rates, government, high season, low season, as you can see there. So those are all updated to reflect that for Schmidt Hall requests as they come up. And then the same policies are already in place for the security deposit, cleaning fees. Those are all already existing. And then next would be Yountville Community Park Picnic Site 3. So this is not a new fee, but it would be a proposed change. As you're well aware, we have our beautiful shade structures there now. And once those were in place, it made sense to have that lower south picnic site be one rentable area underneath the shade structure. And so our goal there is to increase the fee so that it's the same as Veterans Park, because it does increase the capacity of that site from 50 to 75 now that it's been combined. And then the second piece of that would be to take picnic site 4 off of the master fee schedule because we don't have it anymore. It would just be the one reservable site at the south end. So I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have or have any information that you'd like me to provide.
Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and open the public hearing and questions from council. Councilmember Tripp.
In terms of the picnic sites underneath the new shade structure, makes a lot of sense to include them all as one, but does that give us less flexibility in terms of accommodating numbers of group? I don't know what the demand is, but I think it might be pretty big. So that would be my one question. And then the other question I just wanted to clarify on the commercial kitchen in the community center. So up to now, if you wanted to, I said commercial kitchen, but you know what I mean.
Yeah.
Up to now, if I was a caterer and I wanted to use the kitchen, I couldn't, basically.
No, we don't have a mechanism for.
Okay. I just want to be sure I
charging them.
understood.
Yeah.
I mean, I understand.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
thank
the
you.
first question, we went back before we suggested the combination of sites 3 and 4, and generally speaking, I think we had 3 events where someone rented both sites, and so it really wasn't a high use area. And even when they rented both sites, it was still a maximum of 100 because each 3 and 4 was each a 50-person capacity. So it lowers it to 75, but it fits well within what we saw were the use patterns.
Okay, that was my question.
Yeah,
Thank
and
you.
generally, an example is last weekend we had an event that had 150 people, so they were required to rent multiple picnic sites. But I noticed when I came by, they really just combined at the bottom. But just for capacity and parking reasons, we just don't want to overbook the picnic sites. So,
Okay, great.
yeah,
Thank you.
absolutely.
Vice Mayor McKee.
Thank you. So as Samantha is aware, I work at a place that also has a commercial kitchen, and it's a viable business because food trucks, for example, need to base their business, even though they're maybe out on a street throughout the week, they have to base their business on a place that has a commercial kitchen. And all of the particular appliances within are certified at commercial grade as well. And the kitchen is responsible for having a Napa County business permit or a city permit as well as a county permit to operate. So there's deep requirements, and it will be a lot of work behind the scenes as you're gathering those documents. And if chefs have, or we call them artisans where I work, if they have crew that comes in, it also requires insurance writers. So there's a lot to it, and that actually is a really good price, I will say.
Yeah, and like
So
I
get it
explained,
started.
our goal really isn't to have that. We just don't have the availability, I think, to accommodate kind of that ongoing regular use. And so just the goal for us would be kind of the one-off things where we have a mechanism to work with somebody who has a need, but our desire and really our availability doesn't lend itself to running, a weekly operation really.
Yeah, it'll be interesting.
But yeah, we do have to go through the county environmental management process of becoming a certified kitchen through them, and we're working on that. But we're pretty much, the kitchen was built and had a lot of research, I think when it was originally constructed, but as time's gone on, there's things that have been added, so we'll have to maybe look at that a little bit.
And will we do similar with the barbecue area when improvements
So
are
we
done?
did a tour with environmental health when we were looking at that, and the two have to be connected. So you can't permit through the health department an outdoor space for commercial use. It has to be tied to an indoor preparation kitchen.
Okay.
So the two cannot be separated.
And my last question is with regard to the fees for the halls. You have the corporate rate, or not a corporate rate, a commercial rate. Is if Bartisono needed overflow space for a corporate group, do we offer our business partners some sort of incentive to have a meeting there?
We typically only, the commercial for-profit rate would be like if they were coming in to do a sales show or something. And so they're selling something and, making money that way. Unless Bartisono was like, oh yeah, we're going to mark this up 100% for the guest. But typically any of those referrals we're booking directly with the guest. And so we just treat it as a market rate or the company, I should say.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Absolutely.
I had questions, but they all got answered. So
Oh, perfect.
That was good because I was a little confused about the rates. So the rates on Schmidt Hall are totally different. This is a flat $30 an hour, but basically you're renting the indoor kitchen, but you can also use the outdoor space.
Yeah, eventually that'll be the case. So, but for the commercial rate for the kitchen, the hourly rate is really just for the indoor space because there's a lot of different rules and regulations about food preparation, and you really cannot prepare food outside. Yeah.
Right.
So you have to prepare it inside. You can serve it outside, but.
So if I wanted to rent it as a resident and invite 10 people over and just cook some hamburgers and hot dogs outside and hang out at the bar area, I could do that without.
Well, we have a patio rental for that. So that's how you would rent that space.
I see.
Yeah.
Okay, so
So
that,
this
okay.
is just the indoor kitchen.
Oh, okay, so that's totally different than that's not for approval here tonight.
Yeah, no. So we already have a patio rental rate for that outdoor space, and includes the patio, the lawn, and those amenities.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, we don't have any applicant here, but I will take public comment since it's a public hearing. Anybody want to come and address us on the rate fees we're talking and changes we're making? Seeing nobody, I will bring it back. I'll close the public hearing and bring it back for council for a decision. Well, I can still do that. I could still do that and to bring it back for Councilmember Reeves. You want to go first and wrap your question and your discussion together?
Yeah, well, I'm very amenable to all of the changes that were included in the staff report. I have just one issue. I have always had a little bit of a crusade about the fee structure. So my issue is with the Yountville nonprofit rate and then the Yountville resident rate. And I asked a little bit about whether that's a break-even amount or if we're subsidizing. So I would just like, I'm not going to make this discussion happen now, but I would like the council in the future to have a discussion about appropriate fees for Yountville residents versus other categories. So with that, I'm ready to make a motion if you want.
Okay. Any more discussion? No? Well, I think we'd like to hear your motion.
Okay. I will move adoption of resolution number 25-4364, adopting fees and charges for the commercial rental use of the community center kitchen, rental of Schmidt Hall at the Yountville Commons, updating fees for Yountville Park Picnic Site 3, and removing the fees for Picnic Site 4, and authorizing town staff to update the master fee schedule regarding these changes.
All right.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Are we ready for voting with our buttons? All right.
Yes, Mayor. That item passes unanimously.
Thank you very much. Moving on to our second public hearing for this afternoon. This we are going to introduce and waive the first reading, possibly, of an ordinance which will adopt recommendations for the state fire marshal for fire hazard severity zone designation in the town limits of Yountville. So with that, are you going to be making our presentation today for the map we saw in our report?
Yes, ma'am.
All right, great. You could
All right.
give us your name?
Yeah, good afternoon, Mayor Mueller and members of the Town Council. My name's Jason Downs, and I'm the Napa County and the Town of Yountville Fire Marshal. And today, I'd like to present the Town of Yountville's updated Local Responsibility Area, or also known as LRA, Fire Hazard Severity Zone maps, along with the local ordinance that's required for adoption. Essentially, what I want to do today is explain to you the why. Why are we bringing this before the town of Yountville? Probably a lot of members of the community or even the town is questioning we don't have a wildfire issue. But this presentation will explain why we are bringing this forward and what's required of you. So the first step here is these updated maps, recently released by the California Office of the State Fire Marshal, are the first major update since 2007. They are part of a statewide effort to more accurately identify areas susceptible to wildfires using the latest science, refined climate data, and advanced fire behavior modeling. State law, Government Code sections 51178 and 51179, requires that the State Fire Marshal create these maps and mandates local agencies, which is us, Napa County and the Town of Yountville, to adopt them by ordinance within 120 days of receiving these updated maps. Previously, only very high fire hazard severity zones were required to be adopted at the local level. Now, local jurisdictions must adopt all 3 of these zones: moderate, high, and very high. Fire hazard severity zone maps are assessed or are based off of hazard, not risk. They show how likely extreme wildfire behavior in an area based on physical environment over 50 years. Some of these key factors include fire history, the vegetation, the field load, terrain and slope, local weather patterns, and ember exposure and proximity to wildland areas. These maps focus on long-term conditions and do not account for short-term fire mitigation efforts such as brush clearing, defensible space, fire-resistant construction. They also do not predict structure loss, as they exclude specific building features like roof type, materials. And the purpose of these fire hazard severity zone maps is to help communities plan and prepare by identifying where extreme wildfire behavior is most likely to occur. Here on this slide, you'll see the updated fire hazard severity zone map for the town of Yountville on the left. The bold color areas represent the reclassified zones in the local responsibility area. The shaded regions indicate state responsibility areas, or also known as SRA. These updated classifications are based on wildfire data up to most recently 2020. On the right-hand side, you'll see a larger screenshot of Napa County, and the shaded colors again represent SRA, and the bold colors represent reclassified LRA areas. So you can see in the northern half of the county, portions of portions of St. Helena and Calistoga are affected, and specifically here in Yountville, when you look at that map on the left, you can see that the Veterans Home has now been reclassified into a very high wildfire area, which we knew, it just wasn't accurately reflected on the map. So on this next slide, what we'll discuss is, and what I want to make very clear is, if you are located in one of these areas, how will these maps be used? So these maps will be used by the town of Yountville if you're in one of these areas, and they will affect the following. Building codes. New construction within high and very high fire severity zones will comply with the California Building Code Chapter 7A, which include requirements for fire-resistant materials and design features. Development standards. Property development in these zones must meet the state's minimum fire-safe regulations covering road widths, emergency access, water supply, and signage. Defensible space. Property owners in these zones are required to maintain defensible space as outlined in Government Code 51182, and real estate disclosures. Sellers must provide natural hazard disclosures under the state's AB 38 bill, which may include wildfire inspection reports and zone verification. It's important to note when we look at that map that most of Yountville proper is in one of these gray areas, so it's not classified in any of these 3 zones. So therefore, what I just read off will not apply here in the town of Yountville, unless you're in one of those tiny, tiny little areas, and we can revisit that map in a second. And I'll discuss this Veterans Home in just one second as well. Next, this is a graphic that was provided by the state. It just kind of provides a good visual in terms of what's impacted at the local government level. And this summary graphic highlights the specific items and regulations impacted by these changes, ranging from building standards to real estate transactions. The proposed local ordinance will adopt the updated map for the town of Yountville's local responsibility areas. Once adopted, the ordinance will be enforceable, ensuring consistency with state law and enhancing wildfire preparedness. On the next slide here, I really wanted to drill into, and we've got a picture graphic of this map again. I really want to drill down into how does this impact Yountville specifically. So as a part of the recent statewide effort to update the fire hazard severity zone maps, portions of northern Yountville have now been designated as either moderate or high hazard areas. This reflects an increased likelihood of wildfire activity based on long-term environmental factors such as terrain, vegetation, and local fire history. The most significant update in this reclassification is the California Veterans Home. It's now located in a very high fire hazard severity zone area, the highest designation on the map. This change highlights the increased potential for extreme fire behavior in and around the Veterans Home, particularly under severe weather conditions. Because of this designation, the Office of the State Fire Marshal, or OSFM, that's responsible for the Veterans Home, is the lead agency responsible for the defensible space around that property. And they are the enforcement agency for inspections and enforcement of their own state laws. Their role is critical in ensuring that the property remains compliant with state and fire safe standards designed to reduce structure ignitability and slow the spread of wildfire. To help mitigate this hazard, several fuel reductions have already been completed on and west of the Veterans Home through a collaborative effort through CAL FIRE, Napa County Fire, who also serves as the Town of Yountville Fire Department, Napa County Fire Marshal's Office, which I represent, and our local Firewise communities. These projects are aimed at removing excessive vegetation, improving defensible space, and creating fuel breaks. Looking ahead, we have additional fuel reduction efforts planned in the Western Hills, and these will further strengthen the protection of both the Veterans Home and the broader town of Yountville by reducing available wildfire fuel and improving our ability to defend the area during a fire event. And last, I'd like to just show you a few pictures of the fuel modification work in the improved dozer lines and fire access lines that are going on in the hills west of the Veterans Home. So in conclusion, that's some of the work that's being done to protect the Vets Home and the broader town of Yountville. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any specific questions the council may have.
Okay, great. Thank you very much for that presentation. Councilmember Tripp, questions?
Yes, thank you very much for that presentation. I just want to ask you a couple quick questions about the Veterans Home. So you said the lead agency is the Office of the State Fire Marshal. Is that right?
Correct, in terms of fire and life safety.
Right. Whereas in Yountville, would it be your department, which is?
That's correct. So Yountville contracts with Napa County Fire and subsequently the Napa County Fire Marshal's Office. So we work closely with planning, building, engineering, and all things fire and life safety related to anything that is building permit goes through our office.
Okay. So you kind of follow the state fire marshal in terms of what happens up at the Vets Home and the fuel reduction and all that. Okay.
Absolutely.
And so and this is just a question. They just built this giant skilled nursing facility, and I came out of healthcare, where of course we worry about that, a bunch of hospitals. If they had been designated in this fire zone before they built it, would they have to have complied with the different building codes? Because you mentioned the higher fire severity zone does require different building codes, and maybe you don't know that off the top of your head, but would it have been constructed differently or sited differently?
No, I don't think so, because what they constructed there was a hospital, which is going to have a whole slew of separate requirements.
Okay.
Under the state actually classifies hospitals under an entirely different division of the state. And so they were directly involved in terms of the fire and life safety aspects of it. And fire suppression systems, alarm systems, exiting, and all that. But in terms of the construction, I think it's a safe safe building and will be resilient against any fire in the Western Hills that may occur.
Okay, and then my final question is thinking about that fire that jumped 101 up in Santa Rosa. When winds come, it's very interesting that Yountville itself is in, I think, the lowest, the town, most of the housing in the town, in other words, is in the lowest. That puzzle, is that part of what you said, that fire hazard is not really risk? On one of your slides you said fire hazard, not risk, because that still seems somewhat risky for the town. Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah, I think the important part to draw the difference between hazard and risk is the hazard is based off of things that we can't really change, such as the weather, the topography, the terrain, and that's really what these maps are reflective of. And the risk is the things that we can change. So the defensible space. We're out there, we know the importance of that. We know that science proves that if you do the defensible space, that the fire approaching is much more manageable, and that we also know that the structures that comply with certain building codes, they're much more resistive against fire. And so those are things that we can change, the way we construct future structures and buildings, the landscape and the planning around buildings. But can we go back to that map? The clicker wasn't allowing me to go back. But what's important to understand, those are the things that are risk, the things that change more frequently that these maps aren't a predictor of. They're predictors of the fuel modeling based off terrain and local weather patterns over a 50-year period. So relatively consistent and stable things. And so as you look at the proper town of Yountville here, most of it is in a gray area, which means that it's not classified in any of the 3 zones.
Okay.
So
So even though we could be across not a very wide space from a high risk or a high hazard, that doesn't really apply here. Or
Sure.
should we look at it differently? Maybe that's my question. Should we, as a town, look at it differently in terms of our potential hazard being
I really
across?
think when we have high fire severity, we have fire weather. Normally our winds are coming out of the northeast. That is a historical weather pattern that we know of. So we know that if we're going to have those winds, they're coming from east to west across the town of Yountville.
Okay.
It would be unlikely, not total, it's possible, but it'd be unlikely that a fire would push down from the western hills and head east and jump to 29 and impact the town. Is it possible? Sure, and I'm not going to sit here and say that it's not, but it would be an unusual weather pattern that would be an anomaly. Again, based off of the typical weather patterns that we see and what we've seen historically with some of the destructive fires here in Napa County is those fires or those winds that perpetuate these fires and have made them get into some of the large destructive fires that we've seen. Those winds are coming out of the northeast. The hot, dry, red flag warning type weather that we see. So that hopefully gives the town some comfort. The other thing to note is that you're on the valley floor, you're flanked by a highway, you've got vineyards even to the west of that highway that prove as a really good fire break. And then as mentioned, the fuel break and the dozer lines that we've reestablished above the veterans home create a great fire break from anything that might start on the western side of the mountain range, on the Sonoma side, and try to push over, which is the intent of that fuel work. And it also provides a fuel break around the veterans home itself. So anything that might be moving down either north or south on that mountain range, we have the ability to get in there and improve those dozer lines with our hand crews, our dozers, firefighters with hand lines, our helicopters, et cetera. We have a whole arsenal of equipment and resources that we can deploy to protect that facility and the town of Yountville. I want to make that very clear.
Well, and I just want to sincerely thank you for both your knowledge and dedication, because we really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thank you. Any other questions?
Oh, yeah, we've got some more questions. Councilmember Knight.
Keep them coming.
We'll let you know when we're done.
Okay.
Thank you, Mayor. So Thank you for your presentation, and it's obvious, there's obvious where we see for the veterans home, that high severity area. I'm curious, looking at the map for the north part of Yountville where we have the moderate is, and it's within, I assume that's the town limits, I guess, that were dotted off there. Mm-hmm. Is that in terms of looking at near the Yountville Cemetery and Lincoln, and so those are some homes that barely reach into this moderate area?
Yeah, there's going to be a handful of properties that are going to be affected by that. And so if there was development within those areas, that's where these regulations would apply.
So in moderate areas, you talked about wildland urban interface where, for all the years of my work, like WUI or something, mm-hmm. But home development in terms of our building, or our building code for Yountville, would some areas then require windows that meet wildland? Is that wildland urban interface? Is that yellow area considered wildland urban interface?
Yeah, let's see. I think that was the next. This would be working. That was that chart, that graphic that I put up there. And I don't believe moderate triggers 7A. Let me just double check. Yeah, moderate doesn't trigger 7A, so that's the yellow color.
Right.
And then, so there was just a little bit of high that was in that northern part of
right.
on that map there. So anything that fell within that little piece would trigger Chapter 7A. Chapter 7A is a chapter in the building code, just for you guys, for clarity on this. And it just requires wildfire resistive construction. So what we're talking about is fire resistive roofing material, fire resistive siding, windows, doors, and then also our defensible space. The newest thing that we're working on in defensible space is especially with new construction, is a thing that we call Zone 0, and that's that 0 to 5 foot zone where we're talking about no things like bark or flammable plant materials. So non-pyrophytic plants, things like succulents, evergreens, and then using landscape materials like rock or hardscape. And the science and the studies that they've shown have shown that there is an ember resistance when you minimize the penetrations like vents to attic spaces or to crawl spaces. When you have fire resistive materials like hardy back siding, windows and doors that are rated, and resistive roofing, and then you minimize the flammable materials around your home, that home actually withstands fairly well on its own to the ember cast that we typically see when we talk about high winds, and these embers and that ember cast can carry up to several miles, and that burning material then lands up against these homes. That's where we see a lot of these structures that are lost when we see that come across our televisions, and these neighborhoods are lost. That's why a lot of these homes are burning. So we can manage that risk by building to these standards. So
thank you. I think for vast majority of residents, we're really encouraging them to. I appreciate the support, and when they're planning or building or remodeling, that there may not be required to do certain requirements like tempered glass windows and all those, and vent and all the different types of venting for roofing and all that are new, but to be careful and to plan for, we always worry about embers and, like blowing for a long distance. But it seems like at some point we'll also have to talk about some areas in the town limits that there will be different building requirements for a few neighbors or houses or something like that. So, but it's all good, and as you said, from my experience and all with customers that would come from my work and all that were rebuilding because of the fires in the valley, that you're creating a much more defensible home. So it's a good investment. So
absolutely,
thank you.
You're welcome.
Councilmember Reeves.
Yeah, I'd like to go back to the map, and you were describing at the north end of town, and earlier you said that vineyards are kind of a natural fire break, and so when I look at this, sort of orange colored, that is vineyard. And I'm wondering, how does that, is it that it's influenced by the hill behind it more than it is vineyard?
Correct. Yeah, the way that they did this is they used different modeling data and some science that's out there. And so what we see is that is sort of on the valley floor there, but it is at the base of that hill, sort of on that Yountville Cross little knoll that's right there, and that's heavily vegetated area. It is only, a high, not a very high. Mm-hmm. But we are working on the county side. We are working with some of these property owners to manage that area and limit the potential impact of a fire that would potentially get started there and then encroach in on the northern part of the town of Yountville. So we are doing that, and it's just based off the topography, really, is where why it's there. And the other thing that's important to note here, and I didn't mention this in my presentation, but we got together with the city of Napa, the town of Yountville, and Calistoga, who are largely impacted by some of these changes, as you can see on the map to the right there. And with any state law, we can't go less restrictive, but we can always go more restrictive. And one of the questions that was brought up when you look at parcel size versus where these maps lie, some of these parcels are split right down the middle. Some parcels are in these zones, and some are deemed not to be in the zone, and that's just based on how the model produced the information. And what we decided to do was, rather than redraw those lines along parcel lines, we just decided to leave things as is. And so based on development and where you decide to place structures or develop your parcel, it will just be simply looked at here in the town of Yountville and in the county as where you're siting that structure, and is it in one of these zones that trigger these requirements, or is it not? So.
Okay, so I have a few questions too, and then we have the Vice Mayor has some questions. So just so I'm clear, the defensible space is anything that's yellow or higher, orange or red. Is
correct?
Because
yeah.
People read a lot of stuff in the paper. It sounds like everybody has to go take out all their landscaping around their house.
Right.
But so it really has to do with, this is an important map then for that.
It's an important map for that, and we want to make that clear. That we're, the county defensible space ordinance does not necessarily apply here in the town, because the town is not in one of these high fire severity zones where that law applies.
Okay.
So, but to Councilmember Knight's point, we do recommend, just given the hazard that exists around the county, to be mindful of the types of vegetation and plants that you're using to landscape your home.
Always a good practice. Also, you said that this is an update from 2007. Is there any kind of period of when you're going to issue new maps? Or is this kind of like it just kind of happens when it happens? Or how did that come about?
Just to be clear, we as the local enforcement agency are required to do this by the state, which is why we're here before you today.
Right.
The state, I don't know when they're going to update their maps. I hope that they update their maps relatively, on a regular basis. From 2007 and now, that's a significant time, and we've seen a lot of destructive fires over the course of that time. So I do think that you'll see the frequency of these updates maybe be a little more frequent, but I don't have any insight on when that may occur.
Okay.
And the other thing too is the timing of these is that the original drop date was supposed to be the first of the year, but then we had LA, and so they decided to do a phased approach, and they started with Northern California and then subsequently moved their way south in the state. And so Napa County was in phase 2 of the rollout, which is, again, why we're here before you today. And then the other thing I want to point out too, I think we've really hammered home the point that the majority of your residents will not be impacted by these new changes or these regulations. But the other thing that the state really wanted to work closely on was the impact that these maps might have on insurance. And insurance for folks that are in these areas is incredibly hard to obtain, or if even possible, which presents a major challenge for most people who can't afford to not be insured. Again, these maps are based off of hazard and not risk, and insurance base their analysis on a policy off of risk. So that's where in terms of these maps are used for planning, and then the things that we're doing from the local fire marshal's office in terms of our D-space, our building code requirements, and the things that we're recommending and doing through our fuel modification work is really reducing the risk that exists. So,
And I know we would all probably appreciate copies of your slides too, so if you could send those to our town clerk, and I'm speaking for
Can you email
everyone.
those to the?
I will share with council.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, so more questions. Back to the Veterans Home. There are actually, I don't know, sometimes it depends on how many full-time residents we have, but quite a few, pretty large population up there of our of the town. So I think I understand all the things that they have to do for any new building that goes on, but some of the items that are involved, have they been inspected? Are they out of compliance? I mean, I know one thing that you mentioned was having the right kind of access roads. They've got a pretty small road going up and a pretty small road going down. So that's kind of the first part of my question is anybody looking at that, or is that an issue? Did you guys kind of go up there? Or do you have, concerns for it now? If we approve this tonight, well, the county already has, but that being in a red fire zone.
Right, yeah. So, the Office of the State Fire Marshal, because it's a state property,
Right.
has the jurisdiction and is responsible to enforce their own laws on that property. But we do work closely with them,
Okay.
and utilize our local resources, as I mentioned. The Napa Communities Firewise Foundation, the local fire safe councils, and in cooperation with CAL FIRE, Napa County Fire, we're doing that fuel modification work. And so that's where they're taking a proactive approach to protect that facility. In terms of what's
state is
existing
actually-
up there,
Okay.
that's really hard. That's the challenge that, it's easy to enact these regulations on new construction,
Right.
or fire rebuilds. But the challenge is going to be retroactively going back on these properties and evaluating these substandard roads or properties
Okay.
that were at once compliant, and they might not be compliant with their current rules and regulations, but what nexus do we have to go back and require those changes? So
Those are exactly our challenges too. Why I'm asking these questions. Okay.
but I do know that they are taking a proactive approach to protect that property as a whole, and do the proper defensible space and minimize any hazards that might be existing under the current existing structures that are there to protect that community. Ideally, in the event of a fire in that Western Hills, we would. The idea is that they would be able to safely shelter in place and not have to evacuate that community, because that would be a huge undertaking and rather traumatic. And we'd rather not do that. We'd rather just minimize the intensity of that approaching fire and allow our resources to get in there to protect and defend that facility without having a major impact on the residents and the veterans that call it home.
Yeah, because I believe it was the 2017 fires. I don't know if you were here then, but yeah, that was, we were mobilizing all the buses in Napa County, trying to figure out where to take them to, and it didn't, we pulled the trigger, but didn't have to really do it. But there was veterans loaded on buses at one time, so It was,
Yeah, there is
it
a
was
plan in
close.
place for that, and we do have contingency plans for that. But like I said, we're taking steps and efforts to hopefully prevent that from happening. So,
Okay, we have questions from the vice mayor, and then I'll open the public comment.
okay.
So much here. The mayor asked the questions about the Veterans Home and being there just the other weekend for the Memorial Day celebration. I accidentally went to Borman Field first because I'm used to going there and had to weave my way through. And there are so many old buildings there with high weeds. Yeah. And I understand that it's not your jurisdiction, but some of those homes look like they're not going to be rehabbed. That dry wood should be cleared and be a lot safer cleared. But it does provide me with comfort and confidence knowing that the science and the weather science says the winds most typically come from the northeast. But for that Nuns Canyon fire in the 2017 that came from Highway 12 and came over that mountain and had me out of my house on Dry Creek Road at One Lake Bridge for 18 days, and crested the hill behind the fire. I mean, something was blowing it this way. So anomalies do happen. And I live in Rancho now. I want to live in a very boring, safe place. But I feel like if the Veterans Home is at risk and in that high extreme area, that some focus on that side of town, because there is a direct corridor. Yes, there's Highway 29, but if you look at the beautiful trees that line the entrance to the Veterans Home, then Hopper Creek, which is always dry in the summer, there's a highway straight to Rancho where people do not practice safe hardening of their landscape. So, I don't want to out my neighbors, but that is just one area that it petrifies me. And on that note, after talking with neighbors, something that I will be talking with you all about in the future is the experience that perhaps you've all learned from Calistoga and Paradise with regards to a siren alert system. Those were communities that are, especially Paradise, that said the locals said that they would not move back there unless there was some way to be informed of danger. And with Yountville being the ideal town, within a mile, it has been researched that the only area that would not hear if there was a siren at the community center would be the far side of the Veterans Home. So in your experience, I know you can't talk for all the CAL FIRE, but in your experience, do you feel that some kind of an early warning system helps in the event cell phone coverage is down?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's something that's been discussed throughout the county. We do have the high-low sirens. A couple of points on this. One, so some of our volunteer stations, I don't know if you've been up to Rutherford or Angwin or some of those and heard
to
that
the Dry Creek
those go off.
Yeah.
So there's just some discussion of usage of those when needed. Also, the sheriff, which provides law enforcement to the town of Yountville, they use, if you've heard that high-low siren. So normally we hear the normal siren that we're all used to, but they will switch into their cars, and you can back me up on this, that they use the high-low siren, and that's an indicator to the community that, hey, if you hear that high-low siren, that means it's time to evacuate.
Okay.
And the sheriff has the responsibility for the evacuation. So the fire might recommend that these areas get evacuated, but then they'll go through these neighborhoods with their high-low sirens and even go door to door if necessary to alert people that it's time to go. We have a very robust system. This particular topic has been discussed at length at various town hall meetings, specifically up in Angwin with Supervisor Cottrell's district, where we had a large contingent of, I think, 4 or 5 different fire safe councils. Sheriff Ortiz was up there. Our fire chiefs from CAL FIRE and from Napa County Fire were up there. I was up there. Deputy Farm Marshal Eric Hernandez, who's responsible for our vegetation management program in this county, he was up there, and we all had an opportunity to speak about this. And so cell phone alerts, evacuation apps and alerts that people can sign up for. And then we also have our law enforcement partners with Napa County Sheriff that will be actively out there in these communities. Given that Yountville is relatively small, and they would be able to access this area with relative ease. And I do appreciate your comments regarding there has been history of fires going from the west to
it
the
wasn't
east.
trying to,
And it does happen, and so that's again why we're doing this fuel modification project to the
So
west
important, yeah.
of the Vets Home to protect it, and to protect the broader town of Yountville, because we realize if something got going in the Western Hills, that the Invercast, the Highway 29 is not a barrier. The Invercast would impact the town here. But based on these maps and the data and the science that the state used, this is how the maps ended up. However, I think you guys are all kind of right on the same track as we are. I think it's good to at least be aware of this, be aware of what the risks and hazards are, and how you can mitigate against those.
Is there any way to use the map and the proximity to the higher areas? Maybe this is a question for us, more so for Yountville Night Out, but to educate the people in South Yountville, North Yountville, and any of the bordering areas that you are this close. This is, time to take it serious. So, that's probably something for internal, but.
Yeah, I know Hillary works closely with Eric Hernandez. He's not only our deputy farm marshal within the Napa County Farm Marshal's office. He's responsible for three primary things: everything vegetation management related, and then he also runs and operates our public education program and our public information program in terms of some of the information we share. Now, because of the contract that the town has with the county and CAL FIRE for fire protection, the town has access to those services. And so we're happy to participate in any event that the town hosts, and we'll come out and we'll educate, share information, point people to our social media pages, et cetera, to educate folks in that, hey, just because you're not in the map doesn't mean that you're not necessarily going to be affected. You just not a particular color on the map.
Lucky for the minute.
And it really is a good thing for your residents, because when we talk about insurance and all the other complexities that these maps potentially impact, that's a good thing for the residents of the town here. But that really is a policy decision for this council in terms of how you guys want to pursue this and what risk you feel is necessary to manage.
Thank you very, very much.
We have one more question from Councilmember Tripp.
Just as a really quick question, just to kind of operationalize what you said, because we have had the suggestion that we have, and I used to live in a neighborhood that had warning sirens on towers because of where it was located. We have had the suggestion that would be a good idea from Yountville. I think what you're saying, though, is, and we do have a sheriff's office right in the middle of town, their responsibility would be to go and drive around and make, you said high-low? Mm-hmm. So to some extent, we have a mobile, warning system. Would that be correct, so that it might be duplicative
I
to
think
have?
that, I don't want to speak, but that would be a fair assessment, I think. I mean, it is mobile, and you can go to that.
How do people assess whether people, as in like the council, that's a good investment? How would we assess that? Would we talk to people like you? Would we talk to the sheriff and find out what their plan is in case there was an imminent hazard, risk, whatever?
Yeah, I mean, I think I'd be happy to invite our fire chiefs on the operational side that can really outline and explain how, when we get a fire, how they manage that, how the incident command system works, how they're deploying resources, and then how they effectively communicate with our law enforcement partners that are responsible for the evacuation component of that.
Okay.
I know, as mentioned, Sheriff Ortiz did a great job explaining that in terms of how that is deployed in other portions of the county and how it has been effectively deployed in other portions of the county in 2020 and in 2017. So, I think there would be a willingness to provide that information.
So we could get the information and then decide whether we needed a kind of backup system.
Do your due diligence and pull your constituents on whether or not they feel that that's something that's appropriate. I think based off these maps, I think based on what we're doing here in the fire marshal's office and what your fire department's doing, what the local fire safe councils are doing, and the capabilities of your local law enforcement, you are providing quality coverage to your community members. But if you want to go beyond that, that's really a policy decision for this council.
Okay. Well, and one thing about our town is, because I think people are worried, you hear in some of these disaster scenarios that people were unaware because it's in the middle of the night or whatever, they didn't answer their cell phone. We have a town that's one of the smallest towns in California. So geographically, we're not that big that people probably would not get reached by a sheriff. But anyway, okay.
That high-low siren, you'll hear it.
Okay, well, that's what I was asking. I guess that's what I was asking.
That'll wake you up.
Thank
Your phone might not, but...
Yeah, I'm going to suggest for the night out, and Eric and I are on the Emergency Preparedness Committee, that maybe instead of doing it live, maybe we have a recording of it. So people, because I'm sure I heard it on Dry Creek when we were evacuated, but there's a lot of stuff going through my head at that time. So just so we...
That'd be a good opportunity. OES, Office of Emergency Services, has that binder pamphlet, and it mentions the high-low sirens in there, and we typically provide that as a handout at our events. So it would be a great complement to that.
Have a demo.
To have a demonstration.
Unless you want to sing it for us right now.
No, I'll spare you.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Okay, that's all we have right now. I'm going to open the public hearing. Do we have anybody who would like to come up and address us with public comment on this item?
Alan Tenscher. As Eric might recall, a decade ago, the vegetation in the hills surrounding us, both to the north and to the west, is a big concern of mine. I'm pleased to hear that you're working with some of the private landowners, but I'm specifically interested in the highly wooded area to the north of the Veterans Home on the west side, where even from town you can see dead fir trees. What is the prospect of getting any of that fuels reduced?
So maybe you could come up one more time and address that for us in our...
Yeah, I think I appreciate your concern, and I would love to, maybe we can connect after this and get at the specific area. I don't have any specific info to offer you at this time, but what I can tell you is what I can go back and I can talk with Eric and figure out what projects may or may not be planned for that area. What we have established in the county is what's called a CWPP, or a county-wide protection plan. And NCFF, which is the Napa Communities Firewise Foundation, they are really the main organizer for all the fire safe councils within the county. And they sort of manage and educate all of the respective fire safe councils. And the fire safe councils we have, there's 22 of them geographically located throughout the county. And they all have individual needs and interests, and NCFF is the nonprofit agency that manages all the grant funds, state funds, private money. And through this plan, the CWPP, they have created a digital dashboard. And so you can go on their website, NCFF, and you can see what projects they have scheduled, and what work they're planning on doing. So that's a really good resource to check out and to look into. The other thing that we have to look at is, unfortunately, as a result of these fires in 17 and 2020, so much of our canopies were lost. And there's been a lot of great work that's been done, but there's a lot more that needs to be done. But it just takes an extensive amount of money and resources to do that. And so where we focus a lot of our efforts and a lot of our work is around structures, wineries, businesses, communities, access in and out of some of these communities where that work is really vital. And then in some of these interior areas, we can then shift and move into these areas that aren't necessarily close or within the proximity of either structures or access roads, et cetera. So it's just going to take time. It's a community-wide effort. And I will say that with your support here in the town council, with the county board of supervisors support, the contract that the county in this town has with CAL FIRE, our local fire department, the fire marshal's office, and then all of the community work with NCFF and all the fire safe councils, we really have, I think, what is a unique model here in Napa County, along with the cities, that is being looked at throughout the state of California. I was recently at a conference in Santa Barbara with fire prevention professionals. And because of these maps, it stirred up a lot of concern in some of these areas, especially in Southern California, that have just like, wildfires in Northern California problem. And we have been able to articulate the unique model that we have between state and local governments and local jurisdictions, and then also private interests through these fire safe councils and this collaborative effort that is working in unison to mitigate this wildfire threat that we have. And so I'll get with you after this, and then NCFF dashboard, check out their CWPP. There it is right there. And so you can kind of zoom in on the area that you're talking about, and it'll highlight what if any work is planned. So.
Yeah, that's a very, very helpful map. Another question from Vice Mayor McKee.
Back to the alert system. So I know the sheriff can drive fast through the neighborhood and such, and Napa County with the Firewise system is superb and definitely the role model for other areas. But Calistoga has chosen to put in an alert system still on top of all of it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't know the specific details of that, so I don't want to comment on that. Okay. But again, we've highlighted all the work and efforts that we're doing on the fuel modification side. Our operations side is we're fully staffed, and the state staffed up early because of the fires in January down in LA. And then one thing that will be publicly launched, but I'll say it here, it's not really a secret because we've done it every year. But the exclusive use helicopter that is at Napa County Airport will be arriving in the next couple of weeks. We have all the CAL FIRE assets out of Boggs Mountain and Sonoma County Airport.
I know you guys have the assets to fight. I'm just focused. I mean,
I think if this council feels that that's a good sort of icing on the cake, if you will, for this community and
because we have limited access to get out and get.
I would encourage you guys to continue to pursue that. I'd be happy to be a part of that conversation and that discussion. And if that's a path you want to go down, then let's have that discussion. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Still, public hearing still open. Do we have any more public that would like to come up and address us before I close the public hearing? Seeing none, I will bring it back to council. I did notice that we do have the slides in our presentation, but I think this is going to be very useful. I think we're going to have a lot of questions from veterans, maybe we could just put it on the website so we could all access it, and that other map that we could zoom in on. That's the kind of stuff I love, those things, to drill down into one street at a time. So is that possible? We could
Yeah,
think
we
about
can
that?
call it out on a separate page outside of the agenda packet for easy access, and
Okay.
insert the link to the Firewise
Yeah.
project dashboard.
Okay, that will work, because, yeah, we do have it here, but probably on the website it'll probably be fine. All right, so I'll go ahead and close the public hearing and bring it back to council. We have an ordinance that we should consider passing. I know Napa County passed something similar for the whole county, and if someone makes the motion, it will be to introduce and waive the first reading. So with that, and we're going to use our buttons to vote. So
I will introduce and waive the first reading of ordinance number, my notes are all over it, 25-533, adopting recommendations of the State Fire Marshal for fire hazard severity zone designations in town limits, and finding the ordinance exempt from the California Environmental Quality.
I'll second.
okay, we can vote. I have a feeling we're going to be unanimous here, and we are. Look at that crystal ball. All right, thank you very much, everybody, and thank you very much for coming and listening to all of our and answering all of our questions. So, okay, we're very interested in everything. Very, very great presentation. All right, our interim town manager has left, but do we have administrative items before we get to staff presentations?
Happy to chime in
Okay.
in the acting town manager's stead.
Okay, great.
No administrative items on the agenda this afternoon.
All right.
For the next one, council's pleasure on this one. There's presentation materials in your agenda. We can go over them. You can simply receive them and note that you have them and go into your special meeting, whatever your preference is.
Does council have a preference after reviewing the slides in your packet? Would you like our town attorney to do a quick presentation or no
Happy to do
presentation?
it. Shall we?
I would like to, actually.
Let's do it.
but
All right, so we're going. Okay, you're on, Gary. So we're on item 12, legislative update from Attorney Bell.
Start the slides as well. All right. So first we're going to start with some statistics. 2,124 bills were introduced. 1,206 were sent to the governor. 1,017 were signed. 189 were vetoed. Some of these died in committee. Excuse me. And many of them have been reintroduced this year. So it just gives you a sense that there's a lot of bills, a lot of new laws for staff to review. So there is a new closed session exemption for cybersecurity threats. These don't come along very often, the new exemption, so it's noteworthy as a bill here. The next one has to do with your circulation elements. By January 1, 2025, you do need to include all of this information. Won't read it here, but it has to do with truck routes and other things that you need to update. I believe Aaron already has this in his work plan. Aaron?
That's correct.
I'm seeing a yes. It's already in the work plan.
But that says 28. You said 25?
Yeah, 2028. So
Okay.
So these are bills that are in effect now, but some of them have future compliance dates,
I see.
right?
Okay.
So this one is in effect. We've already analyzed it. Aaron's already got it in the work plan and is already starting to think about this. Your general plan has lots of different elements. The circulation element is one of them.
Right.
This is just one of the new things that you'll have to analyze in your circulation element when you get there. And the Attorney General has new enforcement powers. So you'll see this with the housing bills. Many of the housing bills historically did not have enforcement mechanisms, either from HCD or from the Attorney General. This has been a change over the last 3-4 years. The Attorney General now has authority to enforce many of these laws, and HCD also has an entire enforcement division now that just oversees and issues compliance letters and the like. So there's a much bigger focus at the state level on enforcement. Similarly, for the conservation element, these updates will have to be done when the town updates one or more of its elements on or after January 1, 2028. So you don't have to do a standalone update for this, but if you are updating some other element in your general plan, you do need to update for this. And this has wildlife movement and habitat connectivity. So you have to think about connectivity areas, permeability, natural landscapes, existing and planned wildlife passage features, and the like. So that will also be something that happens. So for example, when you update your circulation element in 2028, you'll also have to do this one because you're updating some other element in your general plan at the same time. So for your next housing element update, and I know it feels like you just did this because you did, but you will be thinking about this again, and you need to update your next one in January of 2031, which will be your 7th cycle. And yes, the state of California is already thinking about this. There are 2 new subcategories of lower income households that will need to be analyzed as part of this: acutely low income, extremely low income. So you're used to the other income levels that we often talk about in housing, moderate low, very low. Now we've got acutely low and extremely low. So there will be new analysis that goes into this, including for RENA and other things. But we're not thinking about it quite yet, but we are preparing ourselves because we will be thinking about it the next time that we update the housing element. So existing law allows 2 detached accessory dwelling units on a lot with an existing multifamily home. So important to remember, we're talking about multifamily homes here, not single-family homes. And the existing law allows 2 detached ADUs on that lot with an existing multifamily home. So this bill increases that to 8. So 2 to 8 for existing multifamily homes, so long as the number of ADUs do not exceed the number of existing dwelling units. So if you have a 6 dwelling unit multifamily units, 6 multifamily units, you could have up to 6 detached ADUs.
So is a multifamily a duplex and up?
I think that's right, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so you could have 2 then detached on that one. But that's, of course, what your current law allows. So it really would be a change in law when you get to 3, right? Because you can already have 2. And I should also note for this, for single-family homes, you can have an ADU and a JADU, which you're familiar with. And then you can also have SB9 units. So you could theoretically have 2 SB9 units and 1 ADU and 1 JADU as well, currently.
What's an SB9 unit, just in one quick point?
Yeah, sure. This was a law that took effect, I think it was 3 years ago, but you're testing my memory now. And there were 2. There were a series of bills, 3 of them, and each of them did a slightly different thing related to housing. SB9 and SB10 had to do with lot splits and also additional units. And so SB9 allowed up to 2 units on a single lot with a minimum square footage of 800 square foot, I believe, that met your objective standards at the local level. So it was another way of thinking, kind of like ADUs, and in some ways they look a lot like ADUs. But those 2 laws have to be read together. So someone could theoretically put into SB9 and then an ADU and a JADU on the same lot.
Are these all existing laws right now?
These are existing laws. Yes, I'm just putting some of these changes in context. And then the lot split law allowed division of a lot into 2, and then up to 2 units on each of those lots. But if you did a split first, you only get the 2 units. You can't put additional ADUs on there. So keep it as 1 unit. Yes, you can get the 2, and then the ADUs on top of that as well. So this bill extends the amnesty period for unpermitted ADUs. So the state is very much aware that there are a number of unpermitted ADUs that exist throughout the state. And the previous law said if it was unpermitted as of January 1, 2018, so built before that period, you can't deny it a permit to bring it up to code and legalize that unit. Based on a violation of ADU standards that you currently have. So for example, if someone came in and said, oh, I have this unpermitted ADU, please give me a building permit and I'd like to legalize it, you wouldn't be able to deny that if that permit application did not meet your current ADU standards. So that amnesty period has now been extended to January 1, 2020. So for those unpermitted ADUs that predate January 1, 2020, they are subject to this amnesty program, and the town would still need to issue a permit for that. So AB 1820, existing law requires the town to post on its website a current schedule of development fees, exactions, and affordability requirements. It's a current law. I believe the town does that. This bill allows an applicant to submit a request in its preliminary application for a preliminary fee and exaction estimate, and requires the town to respond within 30 days. So what that means is when someone submits that early application, prelim, they can say, what are the fees going to be on the back end, so that they have a sense of that up front. Upon approval of an entitlement, the town must provide an itemized list and a good faith estimate of all the fees and exactions within 30 days after the approval as well. I don't know if it made it into here, and so I might be jumping ahead a little bit, but the bill also requires in the future that the town have an interactive calculation program on the website where you can go in and put in what you're applying for, the square footage, the zone you're in, etc., and it will tell you here are the fees that you'll have to pay on the other side of that. That requirement takes effect a few years in the future, and HCD was also asked to put together a program that can be used to give to you all so that you don't have to create this from scratch. That's also coming. So existing law authorizes the town to collect development impact fees, sometimes called DIFs, to mitigate a project's impact on public infrastructure and facilities. So you're probably aware there's lots of different impact fees here in town, and also in many jurisdictions it's a common aspect of development. Under this bill, the town can collect these fees only on designated residential development projects only upon the earlier of the issuance of the first certificate of occupancy or the first temporary certificate of occupancy. So this is a shift because historically development impact fees were collected as a condition of building permit issuance. So normally you would go through your entitlement process, development's approved, and then there would be some post-entitlement permits that would be issued, including a building permit. And when that building permit's applied for, at that point, the town would require payment of all the impact fees as a condition of giving the building permit. The thinking there, of course, is the building permit is what lets you break ground and actually start building your project. And so you're looking for some kind of incentive or hook to require the payment at some process, and the building permit was the one that everyone had settled on for a long time. And the legislature has now changed that and said it has to be later. So you are issuing the building permit, they're going through construction, and then your building inspector and building official here in town will go and inspect that building. Under the building code, there's one of two things that can be issued, either a temporary certificate of occupancy, which is sort of conditional. Yes, it meets the standards for occupancy, but there's still something that needs to happen or some things that need to happen. Or a full certificate of occupancy, which is this is ready to be occupied and can be sold. Those are required, obviously, as the name implies, before anyone can occupy the building, and also before the developer can sell that building on the market. So this is just a later process where those impact fees come in. It will have an impact to some extent on your finances and how you're accounting for that. And so we've already been in communication with staff on the impacts of what this will mean. This is a bit of a change. So this last year when this went into effect, it allowed it allowed the town to require payment of these fees when the building was inspected, not necessarily when the certificate of occupancy was issued, and so that's now changed.
But if the impact fees change, do they get grandfathered in, the ones they started 5 years ago when they first dug a hole and then finally finished it, versus something we raised later because it was CPI went up 5 times?
Right. So it depends on what they applied for and what their entitlements were and what they were approved for. So if what they've applied for grants them vesting rights, so you think about like a vesting tentative map, or other certain entitlements that'll vest it. It will lock in place certain things. Fees are sometimes excluded, and so I don't want to say that's always the case, but sometimes it is. And then in a development agreement, you might also lock certain things in place for larger development. So not always, but sometimes.
It depends.
It depends, I know. I really try to avoid that phrase, so I'm sorry to judge. Collecting development impact fees on building inspection is no longer an option. And designated residential development projects include projects of 10 or fewer units. So the law says for designated residential development projects, here's how you collect fees. And one of the definitions is 10 or fewer units. I highlight that here because, as you all know, most of the projects that come here before you are 10 or fewer, which means as a practical matter, this is going to be the new standard in town. All right, this is the so-called daylighting law, if anybody has read it in the news or heard about it. It prohibits stopping, standing, or parking a vehicle within 20 feet of the vehicle approach side of any marked or unmarked crosswalk, or within 15 feet of any crosswalk where a curb extension is present. That's now the default in state law. So this lives in the vehicle code. The vehicle code is one of the compilations of state statutes. That vehicle code says it preempts everything the town does, so the town has no independent authority to regulate streets and highways, unless the vehicle code grants you a specific authority. So whenever you're regulating stopping, standing, parking, signage, streets, anything, we always have to point to something in the vehicle code that gives you the authority to do that. So this is a new vehicle code provision. It does give you a default. This is prohibited now. However, it does give you a way out. You can adopt by ordinance different distances if you choose to. And so many jurisdictions that are concerned about parking, including perhaps the town, have decided to adopt different standards there. It does have to be based on traffic safety standards. So your public works director can tell you there's a set of standards that exist, and there are engineers who think about these things and apply the standards. And so if you are to adopt an ordinance that changes these distances, it should be supported by an engineer's report that explains why those safety standards are still being met and satisfied with the different distance that you are imposing. And then you also need to mark at the intersection using paint or a sign. There's nothing new there. Your municipal code authorizes your town engineer to do markings and change markings and put up signage, and they often do. You can also permit commercial vehicle loading and unloading within those distances if the crosswalk is identified by ordinance and marked using paint or a sign. So you really got to jump through some hoops here and do the ordinance and put it on your agenda if you don't want to follow these default rules. SB 1243. This is the most recent amendment to the Levine Act. This could be a presentation in and of itself. I will not put you through that this afternoon. So I will just give you the cliff notes here that are on your slide. This is for those of you who accept campaign contributions. The threshold used to be $250. It's now $500. So when this rule recently went into effect a few years back, there was a presentation that we gave to you all that talked about the $250 limit. It's now $500. So if you accept a campaign contribution of more than $500, there's three things that happen as a result of that. If you accepted that in the last 12 months, you cannot participate in a proceeding involving that person or their agent. And you are prohibited from accepting that contribution while the proceeding is pending. And you are prohibited from accepting that contribution for 12 months after the proceeding has ended. So think about 12 months back, 12 months forward. That's a familiar time frame. So the Levine Act is part of the Political Reform Act. That's the same law that governs your recusals and your conflicts of interest and the like. And it also uses 12 months. So sources of income fall off after 12 months, for example. So does this one. Track these. You know, if you're accepting campaign contributions, you are filing those forms with the FPPC and also with the clerk here. And so think about it, look at those forms, and then think about what's on the agenda and who's applying. It applies to the applicants. It also applies to the participants here. The participant one is particularly tricky because, one, you won't know who's going to participate in your hearing until you get here. So it's a little hard to predict that. And then also, only if the participant has a financial interest in the decision is it an issue. And so you have to determine also, does the participant who's giving public comment have a financial interest in the decision? And that could be ownership or income from it, or some other financial relationship with the decision that's being made. And that has to be apparent from their public comment too. So we will be thinking through these issues. You all should be thinking through these issues. This is a bit of a sea change. This law used to apply only to appointed positions. So for all of you who serve on your regional boards that are appointed to, that this law always applied to those positions. But the legislature has now applied it to your elected positions. The prior reasoning was, if you're in an elected position, you're accountable to the voters. What you do here is known, and therefore we don't need these kind of protections. But in your appointed positions, you're not elected to those, right? So we need a little more safeguards in place. But after a series of pay-to-play scandals in much larger cities than Yountville, the legislature has decided to impose this on all of us. And that's it. Happy to answer any questions.
Wow.
Yeah.
I can't say what I'm really thinking. Councilmember Tripp.
The change in the act about contributions and the $500 limit, so that did not used to apply to elected officials. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay.
Or in your elected positions, I should say.
Right, okay. Because that's a really important thing to make known as the election cycle comes up, because people could very much inadvertently end up violating it. Yeah. If they accept contributions. And particularly when you think of who we hear from when you have a proposal to develop something, it's usually neighbors. So you could accept a contribution from somebody who is just your neighbor, who didn't have a business in Yountville, and think, well, yeah, it's my neighbor, but should something get built next to their house and then they want to come down and say, I don't like this because it's going to impact my property value, you could end up really having a problem, correct?
Yes.
Yes, okay. So it's tricky. Okay.
Yeah, and also it applies to permits, licenses, and other entitlements for use. And the way the statute defines that, it includes contracts, but it excludes competitively bid contracts and labor MOUs. So it's not all contracts, but it is some of them. And in the entitlement for use and licenses, think about things like use permits and other things. So if you were to accept a donation from someone who had a pending use permit before the ZDRB and then the town council, that could require your recusal, yes.
Or if you accepted a donation from a neighbor who didn't like the use, you could also have a problem if they came down and complained. That it was going to impact their property values or their enjoyment of their property.
Well, if they came down and complained, they would have to have a financial interest in it. So if the neighbor
is property values a financial interest?
No, it's a financial interest under the Political Reform Act.
Okay, well,
so
that's
the same
helpful.
ones that you have, right?
Okay.
So think about your business investments, your income, your personal finances, things like that. So I guess on the personal finances, it's possible. So,
but it might be a stretch to say that saying this is going to impact my property values. That might be a stretch.
Right.
Okay. And then the only other question I had on the one where we have to start putting up on the web what the cost of development permits and exactions, I love that word, does that include things like tree removals and stuff like that, or is it just development permits?
Yeah, for now it's the impact fees.
Okay.
And so they're really concerned about getting housing built and the fees and exactions that housing developers are having to pay.
And that they would know in advance.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, thank you.
Right. Yep.
Yeah, that was a helpful presentation. Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay. No more questions. Do we have any public comment on this item? Seeing none, you're asking us to receive and file? And, okay, does council agree with that? I think I see nodding heads. Thank you very much, Gary. That's amazing, I guess, is the word I'll use for that. And all the new laws to digest and follow. Let's move on to Council external meeting reports, real quick, I have two. Flood control, I'm not going to say what I usually say, but that's still going on. Just wanted to let everyone know that we are very near our 100% design for the flood wall. We're going to be sending out RFPs for someone to build it in this fall, and we are going to start digging on January 26th. And that meeting was on May 27th. On May 21st, council member or vice mayor was also at this. Just one thing I wanted to mention from MVTA. We had one staff report that talked about, in addition to other things, our community shuttle. The Yountville B ranked, had the greatest decrease between the Calistoga, St. Helena, and American Canyon shuttles. Ours was down 22.3%. For an example, Calistoga was down 9, St. Helena was up 13, and American Canyon was down 6. So this is something we'll probably be having more discussion with in the future. Any other updates from anybody else on meeting reports?
NVTA not pertaining to Yountville, other than the Soskell Junction. All of the roundabouts are up for an award. They're a finalist for a Project of the Year award, but it only makes the NVTA planners more aware that they need to do a lot more in airports and Highway 12. Because people can't use the roundabouts if the traffic's standing still, apparently. So that's it for local.
Okay, with that, I'm going to ask for a motion to, are we going to adjourn to our special meeting? And at the end of that, we'll come back and adjourn this meeting. Is that going to be the right process?
You can adjourn this meeting to your continued special meeting from earlier today, and then at the end of that, you will just adjourn your special meeting.
Okay. Can I get a motion to adjourn this regular council meeting until Tuesday, June 17th at 3 p.m.? In a second.
I'll move adjournment of this meeting until June 17th.
We have a second?
I'll second.
Okay, all in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstain? Okay, meeting over. We're going to take a break, and then after the break, we will reconvene our discussion, final discussion from our special meeting. Thank you. I'm going to kind of be flexible for everyone to leave. So, if no one's moving, well, I know, but this is